Hey, I apparently managed to join now.
Hold on, I think there's something wrong, and then my computer is a bit weird.
Okay.
Can you send it to G release?
Can you repeat that? Can I see G release or?
Can you say something?
Something? Can you hear me? Can you hear me at all?
Yes, I can. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess we are in finally. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Marion. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
I don't know what happened. For some reason, I couldn't join. I was waiting in a room somewhere. So.
Mike said the same. But
yeah.
now I think we're all online, so.
Yeah, let's get started.
Okay, so initially I scheduled this meeting because of a specific issue relating to connecting the ability to turn on feature flags per environment, which is also added to the meeting agenda. But I think we'll make it an open discussion meeting because you have started already to work on the dog fooding, the feature flags. So I'd like to hear some feedback from you and what you think is the most important, and also in terms of UX, but also in terms of functionality. So basically, you have the stage, Marion. If we want to start by the book, then the issue that I sent is add feature flags permission. And to shorten the conversation, my thought was that feature flags permissions would be according to the environment permission. So you can either toggle on or off feature flag if you have permissions to deploy the environment. And Vlad here had raised a concern that when we use Flipper as our feature flags mechanism, then all the developers have an option to turn on and off feature flags, even in production, even if they don't have the ability to deploy. So very curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, so that is correct. Basically, developers do not have access to deploy, and they shouldn't, but they should have access to enable and disable feature flags. The reason for that is at any point in time, we might have like hundreds of feature flags, hopefully not, but let's say we do. And the only person knowing the impact of turning off and on the feature flag is the team, not person, is the team that is responsible for that specific part of the code base. Whether developers will deploy or not, that doesn't necessarily matter because there is a different sort of responsibilities between developers and the rest of the infrastructure, at least. So protected environments and environments per se, in my opinion, shouldn't follow who is able to turn on and off the feature flags. Consider this case. You might have an environment like staging, where you want to have everyone have the option of not only rolling out a feature flag, but also triggering a deploy, because that staging is supposed to be used for those type of things. But in production, we have also compliance requirements, and there needs to be a very strict division of who can do what. Deploy is not one of them. Developers won't be able to do that.
And in terms of feature flags for production, we do want to enable the developers to be able to own that.
So we want to enable a group to be able to do that rather than one specific point of contact. Again, same reason. You might have like multiple feature flags, or you know, like teams can have their own workloads that they need to test. So with certain restrictions, yes. So for example, currently we don't have the process around that, but that is going to change, where developer goes into a channel. According to our documentation right now, they're going to a channel, they enable the feature flag, they see the impact, and they move on. Ideally, not only that we want to have this in an audit log, right? Like this needs to be logged somewhere that the action has been taken, but we also possibly want to automatically open an issue, for example, that will note down basically an additional thing to the audit log. So in the audit log, you will see who, when, and what. But in an issue, let's say, it's almost like a change request, basically, right? Like I changed something and I want to have a place where I can note down all of the impact that I have. So I don't know, I enabled the feature flag, so I want to see this type of metrics and how that impacts that. And I want to have a place where I can log that. And then ideally, you would want that item to be somehow linked to the specific feature flag, so that anyone who wants to see, like, now it's on and there is like a change request attached to it, I can easily click on it and like go back and see, oh, this is the impact and this is all of that. And then if I turn it off, yeah, I don't know UX wise how that would look, but my point is, like, if there is a change request, it should be linked to the feature flag. Again, like this is like moonshot type of thing. I don't think we have it right now, but
Yeah,
I
so
think
we do have on the roadmap an option to connect an issue, let's say an epic or a feature or whatever, with the feature flag. So it'll tell you the feature flag, there's a feature flag associated to it, it's on or off, even to which environment, and later on also the percent rollout.
Yep.
I think it'll be at least 3 releases down the road.
Yep. Not an immediate thing for sure. We don't use it properly right now, but that has to change. Like very soon, we'll have to have some accountability of who, you know, enabled this when and why.
Yeah, so audit logs are supported at the moment, but this is more visible to the user. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because, like, for example, audit log, you only audit logs, if I'm not mistaken, only owners of the group or the instance level can have access to. What you need here, for example, in a couple of cases when we enabled feature flags in production, we had customer impact. Ideally, what we would have had was a complete, like, not only audit log that instance owners can access, but also like audit log plus that is possibly accessible to larger crowd.
So going back to our previous discussion about permissions, would we need to create on GitLab itself another group, like talk to the access group and create groups that are allowed to toggle feature flags?
So we do that for release management, and I'm going to say right now, it's total pain in the ass. It is just not fun to share groups with groups. Actually, we can't share groups with groups. So now you introduce yet another level of things that you need to manage. So removing users is not transparent, because you might forget to remove someone from a group and so on. So I'm not sure whether we want to go down that road, at least until that management gets, group management and user management gets improved.
Okay, so we still have a complexity to understand how to manage the permissions of the feature flags.
Yeah.
It seems like it doesn't inherit anything.
It feels like that, I guess, but I think that general our permission system is not the greatest. inside of the product. So I think that's a general problem for a lot of things.
Okay. I
Okay,
don't have an idea.
just a kind of crazy idea. Can we just follow our standard permission scheme for this case, like for the start? I mean, just set a minimal permission level for the project to access feature flags, for example, developers, and just say that every developer and hire can toggle feature flags as he wants.
I can already see that being a problem possibly for customers who are going to be like developer affecting my production or something like that. That's going to be a problem. I'm not going to allow that. That's why this is complicated, right? Like different people have different needs. In our case, we allow.
I meant, for example, we have, I don't remember exact examples, but on the project settings, we have these access levels that, for example, this can be done only by maintainers and that can be done by developers and hire. Can we do the same here? And that probably solves your case if customers don't want developers to access production, they just set a maintainer level.
That's a good idea, Vlad.
Ah, right. That okay. That could work.
Do we
Still not
currently
true.
have this setting?
Sorry?
Do we currently have this setting on the project settings?
Not for the feature flags, but for other stuff we do have.
Yeah.
So I think the first action item would be, I think that's a really good idea. I think the first action item would be to open an issue to request that on the project settings. I don't mind doing that.
I mean, that's still not robust enough, as in, even what we have right now there is not sufficient because you're giving like a large group access, but that's a different discussion for a different team, I guess. This would at least allow us to move into a direction.
Yeah, I agree.
So, it's really funny because we exactly use those features for release management. So I'm sorry, I just got pinged. I'm in the middle of 5 other things as well. So we, for example, block any merge into stable branches because we want to ensure that whatever goes out to customers, only a select group of people have access to. So what we do is we have the release managers group, which, as I previously said, was Bain, that we add to that drop down, and we say only this group is allowed to do this on the stable branch. And I think theoretically, if we have like the default of, you can change the predefined permissions, but maybe you can also change the group who can have access, like a combo of those two, and that might give us some option.
Okay, good.
Vlad, you have a couple of questions, so I can go through those.
Yeah.
Who can create, delete feature flags? So creating feature flags inside of our code base is basically engineers, right? Who can delete them? They can delete them. Who can enable them?
Yeah, we actually discussed all that. I'm actually asking here about the UI, not about the code itself. And as we discussed, probably developer role. Do we currently use project environments for anything?
We don't.
Do we have plans?
But we plan to. Yes, we do plan to. Somewhere down the road. I don't know exactly when yet.
Okay. And as you said before, it's probably not a great idea to have the same permissions for feature flags and environment. Yeah, just to want to capture it here. Okay. Do we have? It's probably more for question. It's probably question more for the customers, not for us. But I guess, Ori, do you think that it's a often case when people want different permissions for feature flags on staging and production?
I
Yes.
don't know the percentage, but I assume there's different use cases.
Yeah, there are different use cases, but for us, for example, we probably also want a different, like we want a very wide scope for staging, but we want a not very controlled, but controlled rollout to other environments.
So
And
I'm thinking, I thought of like different use cases where you want to send a test version to a customer, and like a support manager could do that. Like someone fixed the code just for that specific customer, they want to send it only to that customer, or they want to test it for beta customers or alpha customers, and then see how it goes. And then later for production, you don't necessarily have the same permissions for every type of group.
Okay. Then I kind of I'm not understanding how this all will like fit together. For example, if I can create feature flag, if I can manage feature flags on staging, I probably can create them and edit. But at the same time, I can't access them on production. So when I create it, can I set it to on or off on production, or it's always off by default, or what? How do you think it works?
So I think it should be off by default, but I think that if we do decide to deploy to production with a feature flag on, then whoever has the permissions for the production environment is the one to turn it on.
You can also see it from a different angle, for example, and say that people might be able to create them, delete them, and so on, but and turning them on and off in a vetted environment. In our case, that would be staging, but maybe they need an approval to go forward and enable this in a different environment, such as production.
Okay,
so they might depend on another person's action.
Okay,
to be able
just to make sure I understand here, you mean that I can create a feature flag, but only the person who has the access right to production can enable it, and by default, it's always disabled for production environment, for all production environment. Okay.
Well, you know, you might be touching the code, and then later on it deploys to production, and whatever was the previous state, that should be the state also now, in my mind. I mean, you shouldn't always, like off by default is a little bit misleading, because we might be rolling out like percent rollout, and then, you know, you change it from 25 to 50%. So it's a little bit misleading saying off.
That's I mean, I don't know. When I create a feature flag, like it's in simple case, I just see, let's say, two values, just on and off for all the environments as we have right now. Yeah, in that case, if I create it, I can set it as I wish, and that's probably violates, I don't know, my permissions, because I shouldn't be able to set the feature flag on production to on the on state. I mean, and that's kind of thing I mean, for example, if I can edit, if I open the same feature flag later for the edit, I can't alter this value, but when I create feature flag, I can alter this value, and that's feels strange to me. I mean, I can enable it initially, but I can disable it like in a minute. So I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think we have that status toggle per environment. I think you just would not be able to toggle it on for. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. But that's basically what I said when I said off by default, and I can enable it if I don't have permissions. But again, it can be. It can change the value on production too if the default value in code is on. Yeah.
So again, basically the thought process is that we want the developers to have total ability to work with this on different unprotected environments. So staging, pre-production, whatever environments production is like the holy grail. You want to be as safe as you can, and only whoever needs to should be able to touch it. So it is a little bit confusing, but basically the developers are the one that's creating the tool, right? So you can basically say that about everything because they're creating everything before it gets to master in production anyway. So in this case, it follows the same suit. We're still keeping production safe while giving autonomy to the developer.
Okay, let's move on. Yeah, that's probably not really important. Do we have Yeah, do we want to have a chat ops? I don't know. Probably not in the first iteration, right?
Actually, like we're I don't know chat ops, but we're pretty displeased when we realized that we need to use the interface now for toggling things on and off. Interface, which is also not the greatest, as I posted in an issue somewhere. So ideally, API should have been first so that we can integrate ourselves with whatever we use. Like in our case, we use ChatOps, but just talking with the API and being able to do this programmatically is for us kind of important because we don't do anything in the interface that we don't need to.
So I think API is planned for 12.4. And we did discuss
answering the question of ChatOps. Yeah.
Well, ChatOps is going to follow after. I had a whole conversation with Shinya about that. API will be first, and ChatOps will be second because basically we can still manage with the API without the ChatOps. But of course, I understand that if the process today of the developers is working with ChatOps, we need to give that ability as well.
But if we expose the API, then we can write things in the ChatOps fairly quickly. Like it's just extending, like it's just a wrapper around the API call. So for now, it's
I don't have any other questions.
Okay, I'd like to discuss a little bit about our slowly moving out of Flipper roadmap. So in our next release, we're going to be connecting Unleash to the code base.
awesome.
We have someone from the community that has volunteered to connect out of DevOps with the Unleash library. Even though Andrew already did that and he connected it and it was working, so we know that it's possible. It's a little bit of a pain to configure, but once you finish the initial setup, then basically it works. What's the most important things for you to transition once we start the rollout from Flipper? Because I assume that'll take some time.
So I'm not sure I followed the question, but I'll answer it anyway. I think the most important part is that we can enable, disable feature flags per project, per group. That has proven to be very useful for us. Previously, we had a state of enable for everyone, disable for everyone. Since we introduced it per group, it allowed for easier testing. So we could roll out something in production, have it disabled, and then a developer being able to enable it only for their project, for example, while they do some initial testing. And then rolling it out to a group allows us as a company to test this on our projects, for example, GitLab-com, and then roll it out gradually like that. Percentage rollouts, I don't think we've done so far. The percentage rollout for us is basically project group, more groups, and then everyone. I think that's the big thing for us. The second thing is we use our API to enable feature flags through ChatOps. So API pops up again as an important thing to show. And the third thing is we only do bookkeeping at the moment. through chatops. Again, you can see which flags are enabled or disabled there if you run the command. So that means, again, through the API. So if we could find a way to auto-populate the page based on what we currently have, for example, that would be great.
When you say what we currently have, what do you mean?
So any feature flags that we currently have running in the code base, meaning Flipper currently gives us that list. If we can somehow, when we connect the two, leverage that fact and port that automatically into, so basically load up all of the data that we currently have somewhere in the interface for feature flags, that would be pretty amazing.
Yeah, and why is that important?
Because then someone doesn't have to go and do that manually.
No, I mean, for what reason do we need this information? Like, do we just want to see all the current feature flags on the production, or?
Because ideally inside of the code base, you want to remove feature flags. You want them to not be long-lived. So if you have something that is long-lived, having it inside of the interface should give us a sign that something is off. Did someone forget to remove it? Do we have a problem with the code base, that part of the code base, meaning that now the feature flag needs to remain, and so on. So any feature flag you add inside of the code base creates a drag for your development, meaning, well, you know that, right? So if we, like right now, one of the big pain points is like when you go and run that command to see all the features, it's really difficult to see everything, mostly because it's a huge list of things.
And Mari, for this list specifically, because it's like, what's the criteria for showing it? It's like, are developers interested in seeing it like by the day that it was created, the name or whatever? What's the best way to visualize this?
I would say status, right? Like, is it off or on? If it's on, well, then why is it still a feature flag? If it's off, why is it in there? So when was it last turned on or off? Like, when was it enabled? And if it's if it was enabled and then disabled, we need to understand that. And if it was never enabled, why was it never enabled? So those are the general, I would think, general criteria I would be interested in personally.
So let me see if I understood. So you would like to see the status of the flag on or off, the date that it was created, I assume, because I assume that on a specific age, let's say you have a feature that flag that has been off for like 6 months, probably you don't need it anymore, right?
Correct.
And if we do go back to percent rollout that currently you're not using, but if it reaches 100% and the flag is still on, probably useless. But I assume there's also some criteria about when was it requested and things like that, right? So let's say we're going to advanced feature flags and using it for A/B testing. And then you'd like to see how many times A or B were pulled or something like that.
I mean, yes, but that's pretty advanced.
Yeah.
I would
maybe, we're gonna get there.
Yeah, maybe at some point, right? That might be useful at some point. Also, like, how many times did it get turned on and off? And like, oh, that sounds great, but not really that crucially important.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does it make sense to just like add a recurring job to the CI pipeline, which will just get all the feature flags from API, see when they were created, and like create an issue with all this outdated stuff?
Probably, but that would mean I would have to do it, and I don't want to do it. I want to use my product to do that for me automatically.
Yeah.
Like, I agree with you. Like that probably would be okay, but we're talking about bringing value to our customers, and they don't probably, most of them won't do that.
Marin, what strategies are like really important feature flag strategies? You said a percent rollout, not so much.
We're moving slowly in the direction of being able to do that, but right now it's like less on the priority list.
I do have like issue open that's supposed to connect the percent rollout together with Kubernetes. And then the two combined will give like a lot of value for incremental rollout, but that's far away. When I'm looking at the current things that I'm trying to prioritize, so I did see that some of our competitors have an option to find like feature flag dependencies. So let's say you have a feature flag, let's say you have two feature flags, A and B is dependent on A, and A is off, and now I come to turn on B. Basically, we shouldn't be allowing that situation. Of course, it'll take time till we get there. How important do you see that as the day-to-day that you will use it?
So our day-to-day, that's exactly the reason why I mentioned the housekeeping, right? Like the index and so on. Like if you check out our docs, we say the feature flag should be removed ASAP. So we're trying to not have that situation and not have that bloat by saying feature flags should be short-lived, as short-lived as possible. If it's longer than a couple of releases, something is wrong. You need to check yourself, I guess. I think if you go into that type of features, I'm afraid we kind of already lost the battle. Imagine that inside of our code base, which is huge, and then having like hundreds of feature flags that depend on each other. That would be that for us. I think that would be like really, really difficult to do. So I don't think for us at the moment, I'm not saying for us in 3 months, that's not going to be important, but I'm saying us at the moment, we are trying to keep feature flags as short-lived as possible.
Okay. Mike, Hayana, do you have any UX questions?
I'm trying to absorb everything.
Monday.
Yeah, and also that kind of have to look back into this issue to figure out what's going to change in the UI, but also the bigger question maybe for me is like who's gonna take over that, because Mike and I are both working on feature flags at some point in time. So I think that we need to have this conversation. But no outstanding questions. No. Mike?
I'm good. Was great though. I feel like I got a lot of answers to questions that I would have had, but
Marin, do you want to add anything that we didn't discuss now?
So I realized that that you are all like dealing with like a bunch of requests, like different sort of requests. So keep in mind that whatever I'm saying here, it's only limited to the state of affairs at the moment at GitLab, and I'm not like fairly certain like where this will go further. But when I went to the feature flags page, I understand that it's work in progress, we are improving it and so on. What made it really difficult to use is this very unclear state. Like if I know that I have multiple environments, just having an index page that shows me a status of the feature flag is a bit misleading because I have multiple environments. So for example, our chatops command, even though it's not perfect at all, far from perfect, at least gives you like an idea of whenever you like trigger a feature flag, what environment it is enabled on and what it is not enabled on. So I actually have to go and take an action of going into the feature flag itself, like edit or whatever the button is, to understand where it is enabled and where it is. And like if I just see active, for example, that's very misleading. I would then expect, okay, if it's active, that means it's active on all environments. So that interface needs probably a bit of thinking through, ideally with a way of somehow marking which environments it is enabled on and which it is disabled on. And I already mentioned the API, how important that is, just because I'm not going to stare at that page every day, and definitely not when I'm spending most time in Slack or issues somewhere or whatever, right? Right now, it's multiple clicks to get there to do something.
Yeah, on this note, because I think we work on feature flags, at least the UX of it at different points in time, and the UI really feels like a disconnect. I completely agree with you, Marin, because I think that we never really looked into what this is going to be in the future, like with the additions of all those functionalities. So my question is, do we have a audit? Do you think we have the time or somebody get the opportunity to think of this UX more holistically, really putting together like a workflow and what the ideal or what the improvements of the UX would be for this, or we're looking more into the quick wins and just some UI polish?
So time is like the most valuable resource. I did have a conversation with Mike about some change that I wanted to do regarding now we added enabling feature flags for user IDs, and I think it's impossible to use. I think it's very good for someone who has very few customers, but once you think about a large scale organization or medium, adding users one by one is a real pain, and we should either have some kind of import, or I discussed with Mike, there's a new issue about that regarding adding users to groups, even though Marion is in love with groups, and then just managing the groups instead of the users, because that seems much easier. So that in itself requires a big change in the UX. So we might be going back to the drawing board in any case. So if we need to do it, let's try to get everything we can inside this refactoring, whatever we think of for the entire roadmap, as far as we can think of. Because doing it incremental is great and everything, and it's that way. But if it's not useful, then I think we're missing the point.
Yeah, I think we backed into this a little bit, and I think if we don't correct now, we're going to get so far down a path that we're not going to be able to correct. So I do think.
Yeah, and as you know, I mean, I only been here for 2 months, and most of the things weren't even in my hands. So, I do want this to be very successful, and so if we need to rethink it, let's rethink it. Reuse as much as we can, but if the customers aren't going to use it because of bad experience, then we might as well just redo it. We're not that far along in the roadmap.
Right. Maybe this is like a good opportunity for us to do, I don't know, perhaps a quick job to be done, just to be able to identify this and bring also UX research, because we all know where the pain points are, but it would be awesome if we could actually validate those assumptions once we have them from the UX point of view. Cool.
We can even do it behind the feature flag.
Cool. Can I answer any more questions now that you have me here?
I think I pretty much understood what's the most important items for me to push for the next release or two, because we're a little bit light on 12.3, so we won't get a lot accomplished there, but 12.4, definitely going to make sure the API gets in there.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you take my words with a pinch of salt and ask more people, because otherwise you're going to be building a product for me.
Well, great. Thank you so much for your time, Aaron. This was very helpful. I'm sure I speak for everyone.
Always, you know where to find me. All right. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, see you later, guys.
It's like I thought everybody were frozen. You're so quiet. Okay, I'm gonna post this video to Unfiltered. I'll try, and I'll send you the link.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Have a good day, everyone.